Hello there guys, Daniel Childs back here again. Hope you're doing really well on this Sunday. This is my Aston Villa review. The reason it is quite a bit late, I actually didn't get to watch the Aston Villa game last night. I was actually out with some friends and I didn't really think about football that much. Obviously saw the result, but have had to go back and watch the game, and here to give you my thoughts about it. And I think I could just repost my review of the Man City game, repost my review of the Brighton FA Cup game, repost my review of a lot of games, because it has become kind of the standard Chelsea game under Enzo Maresca this season now, because it's been going on for so long. Chelsea start well, they start positively, they score the opening goal, we have some chances to double our lead, the opponents rally, Chelsea don't respond well, there's a goalkeeping error that costs us dearly, and we end up losing the game. Now, when this first started happening under Enzo Maresca, I think a lot of people wanted to just put it down to a couple of weeks. But now we've been sat here for months, and literally now we're into, 2-3 months? It's going to be March in a couple of weeks. It's becoming an absolute farce, and it's hard to kind of know how to say new things about old and reoccurring problems. That's the issue we're having a Chelsea podcast at the moment. And not just going into every review where we dive into headfirst into the sporting directors and Clearlake, because it's very difficult whenever a game like this happens to not instantly look above everything on the pitch, because in some ways that eliminates any responsibility for the players, which I don't think is a good thing. But unfortunately, as I've sat here before, I think above them is more important, because I think that culture gets set from the top, and I think when you see performances that have deteriorated over a period of months, I think that says more about the culture that's being set behind the scenes. For Enzo Maresca now, this is a very difficult moment, because I think for him, he has in some ways been shielded at times from the problems above him. Obviously, the season started so much better than anyone anticipated. The fundamental squad problems behind him have absolutely been exposed, undeniably. Injury problems have reared their heads again. But I also think his issues as a coach that I think we all feared in the summer have only continued and been exacerbated. There's a bit of irony that Aston Villa away game for Pochettino 12 months ago was kind of the catalyst for a strong end to the season. And when Chelsea went 1-0 up in this game, maybe there was a feeling, because of some tweaks that Maresca had made in the starting lineup. You see Reece James kind of shifting into midfield, Pedro Neto playing as a number 9 effectively, Palmer maybe playing a little bit out wide than he had before. And Nkunku in there, obviously, and Enzo Fernandez especially being able to play with a license to roam forward and get in the box and score the opening goal. The way Chelsea played at times in this game was a lot more direct, a lot more transitional than we have seen for some time, and that in itself is a positive. The problem is results at this stage of the season matter, and I don't think anyone can sit here and deny that game, whilst for periods could have gone in a much better direction, was far too similar to recent ones. I think psychologically, when you look at a tight game like that, you think of mentality, you think of psychology more than like the Brighton game, where it's just absolutely disastrous from the minute go. And basically, we do absolutely nothing in the game. But I don't think it's a surprise anymore when I was with a fellow Chelsea fan who said the moment we went 1-0 up, they were already kind of sceptical that we were going to win the game. They thought, that means we'll probably lose it 2-1. And it's become very predictable. And I think the shame and the dread and the pessimism that are set in amongst Chelsea fans currently is that it is also predictable at this point. And it's difficult to kind of, as I said at the start, to say new things about very old problems. I look at the body demeanour of Cole Palmer on the pitch, and I see, Enzo Fernandez was very, almost tearful basically at full time, which is a bit surprising. And I can only imagine, the confidence has been sapped from these players over a period of time now. I think it's very easy for us to place our own kind of perceptions about Chelsea onto these players and assume that Palmer's maybe frustration is a sign of Clearlake failing the club. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's very difficult to know what's in the minds of players unless they speak honestly and openly. However, I do think that, you look at some of those players like Cole Palmer, Palmer has been a revelation. He's been really the standout world-class thing. The only elite thing about Clearlake's Chelsea has been Cole Palmer. And sure, he did miss a couple of big opportunities, especially the one where Martinez is, slipping, and he absolutely should be burying that. I think a year ago, Palmer probably does bury that. But I'd ask you, rather than looking at Palmer and starting to have a go at him for failing, I think, from my perspective, you have to look around him. You have to look around the club currently. And is it a case of a very good player, but also within context, a very young player? This is not someone like Hazard, who's a little bit older when he started to hit form at Chelsea, who was also, me and Joe Twiddy spoke about this a lot in our State of Chelsea, right? That the environment matters for these players. And especially a player like Cole Palmer. He is outstanding, astonishing. He's done things that I think has earned him so much patience and trust, rightly so, from Chelsea fans. And I think undeniably, you give him patience, he's going to hit form again. I have no doubt about that because he's a brilliant footballer. But, you look at a player like Hazard, who I just mentioned, he had players around him who were of a similar mentality, maybe not technical quality, but at least in terms of importance to Chelsea. And you look through Chelsea history, that's what Palmer and like other players, talent, potentially, brilliant players in the future for Chelsea lack. They lack experience, they lack maturity, they lack a standard of quality around them. And I also think in the dugout that will help them, achieve their potential. And that is the issue currently. And that's my fear with players like Palmer, right? That he's in such a bad environment at times that is so divorced from accountability, from competence, that has no ambition to get beyond sixth place, it looks like, that eventually he's just going to move on, which I think is inevitable if Chelsea keep failing. I think undeniably too, there is a massive irony about this game, that in a tight game between two teams who are going for Champions League football, Chelsea absolutely wiped the floor with Aston Villa in December when we were in our good period, right? But obviously they've turned things around. They're into the knockout stage of the Champions League. They're through in the next round of the FA Cup, and Emery has rectified things. Also, whilst losing a good goal scorer for them in January, his board went out and strengthened in January. Marco Asensio, who scored 2 times in this game, and also Marcus Rashford. Ironic that Marcus Rashford is involved in the equaliser. Now, I don't just all want to put it down to January. January was a failing, but so was August, so was the summer. But it shows you, right, the difference in just levels of serious football wisdom and strategy. I fear now we're in a place where any kind of decent football team that has a strategy, that has a work rate, has a decent chance of beating Chelsea, because either we have major flaws. Jorgensen has proven in the last 2 weeks that he's no better than Robert Sanchez. But let me make something abundantly clear. That is not because Robert Sanchez was harshly treated. We've just got 2 abysmal keepers who should not be anywhere near Chelsea Football Club. Georgia Petrovic should be in goal. And again, I go back to what is there new things to say about this, because it's also predictable failure. I said this in the summer, that Georgia Petrovic was a keeper that you should have stuck with. And in the model of looking at young players and trying to buy in and give them more opportunity that they could become better, that was Georgia Petrovic. It wasn't Robert Sanchez. And even Philip Jorgensen had major question marks over him. You look at the regression again of a player like Malo Gusto, who's gone so far back this season. I think it's just disingenuous if you don't look at the coach. Maresca, I don't think Maresca can be alleviated from everything, because Pochettino, for a lot of people, couldn't be alleviated from everything last season. Fitness-wise, the team looks a lot worse the longer games go on. Chelsea, I think one of their best attributes last season was an ability to keep going until the end and get some dramatic late wins. This team physically looks shot by about 45 minutes maybe. And when you factor in that for a large part of the first half of the season, there was a clear separation between the A and B team. Chelsea, I don't think are going to get Champions League football. I just think I've got to be honest here. I can't see it happening. Now, that's not me accepting that in any way. The clown show, the comical farce of a stand-up routine that Maresca has been doing over the past few weeks, where it's top 4. No, it's not top 4. He literally on Friday talks about how top 4 is the ambition, and how he gave this rallying cry about a month ago to his players, to staff, to kitchen members at Cobham about how top 4 was the ambition, and literally post-game against Aston Villa, top 4 was never the goal. It all comes back to a similar thing, right? And why some people have decided to protest on Tuesday, and why I think rightly so, we have reached this stage with Chelsea fans absolutely holding contempt for the decision makers at Chelsea, because this is not a serious football club. And even this morning, before shooting this review, I'm hearing about how apparently senior decision makers at Liverpool, Arsenal, and Man United are scared of Chelsea. Yeah, I'm sure Liverpool are really scared about Chelsea's vision as they go on and win a Premier League title with a canter, as they go on and probably compete seriously for the Champions League. I'm sure Aston Villa are really fearful of Chelsea as they try and get that Champions League place, try and win an FA Cup, try and go far in the Champions League. It's an insult. This is not a football club that's meant... At this point, the sad thing is it's so far detached from anything even reflecting a football club that you can seriously look at and fans can buy into, because it seems like all it is now is PSR accounting, ego trips, people defending their positions behind the scenes, and a squad that is so lacking in character that there's it's not even like there's turmoil behind the scenes, but at least there's a charismatic coach on the sidelines that rallies people behind him. There isn't that. There hasn't been that so far under Clearlake. Our best player is now starting to show signs of maybe a bit of regression, which is concerning. There is absolutely nothing about this team and this club currently on the men's side, not talking about the women's side, who are far and away so much better, so much more of what Chelsea should be. I'd advise anyone who hasn't listened to my podcast with Joe Tweeds, please go and listen to it, all the parts, because they kind of sum up everything. Like, even though a new game has happened, everything me and Joe said about Maresca, about the tactics, about the style of play, about the recruitment, about the sport directors, about the fans, about the ambition of Clearlake, I think are all still relevant, and I think they will be. And I'm sorry on these shows we keep on getting back to the same thing, but I don't know how else you tackle Chelsea at the moment. I don't know how. I just think it's dishonest if we just act like these are games in isolation, because I can't act like these are games in isolation. Maybe other people can, but I don't think we can. And I have to say, I think majority of people now, at the very least, there will be varying levels of, seriousness and kind of where they stand on these issues, which has kind of been an issue of the protest, right, of how clarified it is. But undeniably, people are not just looking at games anymore. They're looking at structure, they're looking at decision makers, they're looking at long-term planning, and they're asking serious questions, and rightly so. Last night was not maybe it's different because I watched it after, but last night was not the worst performance of the season. That was probably Brighton a week ago, but it was also, another sign of Chelsea failing to beat anyone decent, which has become a very good trademark of Clearlake. We don't beat anyone serious anymore. Anytime we come up in a situation where the team needs to respond positively, and actually those tight games where mentality and experience and maturity and character are going to get you across the line. How many times over the last 3 years have we seen that? I think there's a handful, and I think most of them actually came last season. So there we go. Those are my thoughts. Obviously, we're going to start to look forward to the Southampton game, but I think a lot of that is going to reflect around what happens at that protest. And listen, I think if Chelsea don't win on Tuesday, I don't see how Maresca stays in the job much longer. Now, that again, you have to reiterate this, unfortunately, all the time, because we're not a normal football club anymore. That doesn't mean that he's going to be replaced by anyone better, or that we're suddenly going to hold accountability. I just don't think he's a good enough coach for Chelsea Football Club. But I said that in June, right? Like, if Chelsea fail to beat Southampton on Tuesday, not only is the season really, really done, but I fear how it's going to turn. But the question I'll ask everyone, is that the responsibility of the people inside the stadium, outside the stadium, or is it the accountability of those who have brought Chelsea to a point where the situation has become so febrile and toxic? So there we go, back Morning Blues, back for Team Selector, and of course reacting to whatever happens on Tuesday night at the Bridge against Southampton. Have a great rest of your day. Please rate, review the podcast, all of that good stuff. Follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.